Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Shopmin webinar focused on life after lockdown from a grocery consumer perspective. My name is Stuart Sankey, and I oversee the Shopmin UK business, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us this morning. We've got 30 minutes today plus Q&A allocated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip through the key findings from our consumer pulse survey. You don't need to go crazy and write tons of notes everywhere because we will be sharing a full copy of the presentation a bit later on today. We'll send it out via email to all those that have attended. As we go through, if you've got any questions, there is a Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar. So feel free to add any questions in there into that chat window. And at the end, I will do my best to answer them all or pick out any points to come back to you on later. For those of you who are not familiar with Shopmin, at Shopmin, we essentially connect brands to consumers using our proprietary technology and our exclusive data built through our audience and the data that we are able to drill down below that. And we enable primarily FMCG brands to both build their brand and, most importantly, deliver measurable sales offline and online. The business was founded back in 2011. We're a team of just over 100 at the moment. Our core markets are France, the UK, Belgium, and the US. And we are part of the Quotient Technology family, which is a public company in the US. And what we do is we enable brands to both reach and engage their audience and convert them into buyers or regular purchases. We do that through a combination of our owned and operated media channels, which today is the Shopmin app proposition, and our exclusive data. So brand building, sales driving, and out the back of it, building insights that drive measurement, give you some consumer insights and ratings and reviews. The data that we're going to share today is born out of a series of surveys that we've run since April 2020. We've run 6 editions in 12 months, not necessarily at equal periods, but the primary purpose of those surveys was to provide FMCG brands with regular, easily accessible insight into the hearts and minds of the consumer at a time when consumer trends are changing regularly. The base return on those surveys has predominantly been around, the bottom has been 1,069 and the top end 1,743. I think before we kick off, it's important to remind ourselves of what we call at Shopmin the turbulent timeline and some of the key milestones that have passed. One is that obviously we started off lockdown in 23rd of March. At Shopmin, we did a consumer pulse survey at the very beginning of that as we were all hit with the impact of schools being locked down and workplaces being closed, etc. We saw at the start panic buying and stock challenges in store, and that was then swiftly followed by retailers having to adopt their strategy, both their in-store environments and also their product and distribution pricing strategy as well. At Shopmin, we ran another survey in week 10 of lockdown, just before the government introduced the rule of 6 outside for the first time, which sounds very familiar these days, but it was the first time then. Those stock issues and supply chain challenges continue to exist in the FMCG and retail space. Back in July last year was when the government first reopened restaurants, pubs, beauty, working from home rules were eased. Face coverings in shops were made mandatory for the first time in July last year. And the government launched the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and we ran another pulse survey back in August. Then in October, last year, just after the curfew had been announced for the first time. The 3 tiers had been announced, 3, 4, 5. I think it ended up being 5 tiers in total. And just before the kind of national lockdown 2 was put into place, we ran another survey just before taking a look at what Christmas was, how people's perception around Christmas was going to be. Then Christmas got cancelled, and we went through what was quite a challenging Christmas period, I'm sure, for most of us. And we kicked off the new year with the anticipation that there was going to be another national lockdown, but that the vaccine program had started. And so at Shopkin, we surveyed users again at the end of the year, at the beginning of the new year. And since then, it's been vaccine, 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 as we all know. On February the 22nd, the government announced the new roadmap, or the way out. With enough time from that, and just before the stay-at-home order ended, we have run our most recent Consumer Pulse survey, trying to provide an overview of what the current situation is and taking a look ahead at how people are feeling about the next 3 to 6 months. Let's just quickly remind ourselves of some of the key things that we learned. Now, there's much more to it, but just picked out a few highlights related to the various surveys and insights pieces we've run. So at the beginning of lockdown, one of the key takeouts we saw was that we were all scrolling on our phones way more than we had done in the past, whether it be using our phone for FaceTime, WhatsApp calls, Zoom, etc., with our friends, family, not just our work colleagues, but even more so for looking at it for inspiration, for content, for social following, etc. And so time on mobile really grew quite dramatically. In week 10, one of the key takeouts we found was that after 10 weeks of restricted movement, convenient shopping habits had changed quite dramatically. And so I'm sure for those of you that are in the impulse game, there were real challenges around the struggle of driving footfall into those stores. But when we were going into those stores, that we were spending more because we were making more of that particular experience. And even after things opened up again, back in August, safety was still a key concern for consumers, and perceptions had even started to change on things in our space, in the marketing space, around the willingness to receive product samples, for example, with over half of 16 to 34-year-olds saying that they just did not feel comfortable with receiving a physical sample from a brand, for example. Then October came along, and at Shopkin, we decided that we were going to focus that survey on looking ahead to what Christmas might be like in comparison to how we know it. There were clearly going to be some key category impacts in the grocery spaces, and we found that there were going to be falls in alcohol and beauty buying. Christmas was cancelled. It got announced and then it was cancelled. And so we took a barometer on the mood at the start of the year. One thing to check in on was how decision-making behavior had changed as both our habits and our mindset had adapted during the pandemic. And our survey data showed that more was going into pre-shop planning, whether it be writing lists, planning meals, looking for inspiration. People were doing more of this than they were doing so pre-pandemic. So this brings us to where we are today. And there's no need to remind ourselves too much of the winter we've just been through, but sharing the results of our latest survey, we've particularly timed this to just before the stay-at-home order has ended, but enough time for the new roadmap to sink in and people to really think about how they were going to come out of it. Before I jump into the key results, I think it's important just to take a quick look at who these survey respondents are. So it's very similar with the Shopkin audience, naturally, because it's made up of them, but 69% female, Majority age between 25 to 45, a complete national split, so pretty much in line with national population, and 50-50 those with children living in their households and those with not, almost, and under 18s accounting for 38% of the audience. One of the things that we wanted to check, or we had a hypothesis as we went through the data, was whether there would be an impact on some of the results versus people who were vaccinated or not, or who had received the first dose of the vaccine and who hadn't. What you can see here is that 44% of survey respondents had received a vaccine dose. And reassuringly, it's great to see that the data we have here is pretty much in line with what the government have been telling us. So great news for both the government and for the survey results. But also, we haven't filtered further on in the results, because the reality was that we did see no difference in people's risk perception or habits or changes amongst those that were vaccinated and those who had not received a vaccine dose yet. From an economic perspective, you can see here that majority of people are employed, of survey respondents, but 30% are reporting a decrease in disposable income since the start of the pandemic. We kick off with these results. We're taking a quick look at the current trends on shopping. So firstly, we see that weekly store visits are much higher than the initial lockdown period, and they're back up to the levels experienced in the summer. We can see that today, the vast majority are shopping in 2 or more different stores per week. A lot has been talked about regarding the growth in e-commerce. We've seen consistently in our survey results that through the pandemic that approximately about 21% on average are using grocery.com regularly, of which 72% is via delivery versus click and collect. Let's take a quick look at what the current decision-making behaviors are. Firstly, 87% of consumers are saying that they are prepping a shopping list of some sort. But the great news is that 80% are still being open to being swayed by brands, either in the prepping phase or whilst they're in the in-store environment. We also see that consumers are looking for inspiration. And certainly in your target market primarily, this is mainly across digital platforms like websites, apps, etc., blogs, rather than necessarily traditional media formats. But really, there has been a significant growth in people looking for inspiration on what to consume or what to be buying in the supermarket. One of the other trends that we've seen is that there is a growing appetite for promotions, particularly in those aged under 45. And we see we thought it would be important to find out whether consumers wanted different things from brands. Had there been a change to some of the key drivers behind brand loyalty, or what was getting somebody to try or engage with a brand? But the great news is that for me, that seems pretty much the same as it's always been. It's driven by a combination of fit for me, whether that be product taste or suitability of that product to my life, and obviously value. Or perceived value. But interestingly, I think we saw a lot of brands at the start of last year focus very heavily, and even before that, on CSR initiatives quite naturally, focus on environmental impact, charitable work, etc. But when it comes to kind of some of the core decision making, those things seem to have fallen further down the list. Looking ahead from where we are today, this is the roadmap that we see. So we're now, I don't know what percentage of you have managed to get to a pub in the last 48 hours, but obviously we're past the April the 12th milestone, looking firmly on May the 17th, but we've got a long summer ahead. So that June 21, where potentially limits end, there's still a fantastic summer and obviously rest of the year ahead. Obviously, Shopmin, we've got a number of initiatives going on, but there are also some key sporting occasions and key trading events like the Euros and the Olympics, which will be obviously heavily televised, with a vaccination program going all the way through. So what trends have we seen, or what trends do we anticipate moving forward? As you would expect, there is a big appetite for outdoor socializing, with 83% saying that they will be doing it once or twice per week from now moving forward. But just as importantly as the frequency of it, and 73% say that they plan on buying food and drink specifically for those individual occasions. So that's meeting outdoors, either in private gardens or in public places. We're not talking about here going to pubs or restaurants. And when it comes to what specific items these people are saying that they will be buying for these occasions, we can see that top of the list is savory snacks and soft drinks, followed by fresh snacks, barbecue ingredients, and then moving down to alcohol. But savory snacks, e.g. crisps, chocolate, those items being bought specifically for those occasions. As some of us have already experienced or may already be experiencing, travel for work is and will continue to increase. Bearing in mind that some people may already be traveling for work regularly and may have been continuing to do so throughout the pandemic, 41% say that it will be doing it more, and 50% of those people saying that they will be doing it 4 or more times per week. That is quite a big jump from where life has been now. So we anticipate movement to be up. So bearing in mind that data, we thought it would be very interesting to find out how those people's shopping habits or their consumption habits might change in that time. And so we asked for meals while they're working at another location over the next few months, what do they anticipate they will do most often? And 61% said that they would be bringing pre-prepared food and drink for consumption from home, which when you add to those that will go to a supermarket and buy ready-to-eat items, or those that will go to supermarket and buy a selection of ingredients, that means that 76% of work-related food and drink consumption could be based on supermarket purchase. We all know what's happened this week. Pubs have reopened, and what consumers are saying is that 52% intend to visit, so just over half obviously, intend to visit a pub beer garden, of that the majority, 78%, believe that they would do that once or less than once a month. So the frequency of it maybe being lighter than some of what our personal perceptions might be. And when it comes to eating out in those in pubs or in those restaurants up until the 21st of June, again, we can see here that it looks set to be roughly on average a once per month occasion, as opposed to maybe a weekly one, or even in some cases a more frequent one. As what the trend that seems to be coming out the most is that eating at home is becoming the norm. It has been the norm, obviously, for the last 12 months, but will remain a key staple in comparison to life before the pandemic, where numbers may have been eating out more often. We see this cemented where by looking at the trends now, and once lockdown has been fully lifted, against meal planning and cooking from scratch. And we can see here that there are very little change anticipated in those current habits which exist. So meal planning is quite high. That's set to be the same, and certainly cooking from scratch high too, and will remain so. Um, all of which that data tells us to expect very little change in current grocery shopping spend. So 72% reckon that they'll be spending overall the same, with only a little bit less and a little bit more. Very quickly, let's take a look at mindset. We ask consumers which of these statements best describes how you feel about things returning to a new normal later this summer. Key takeouts are that a third are skeptical about what's about to happen. They think things will be different, that they're skeptical about things going back to normal, and that things will definitely be different. Just under 50% are very excited, and about a quarter are apprehensive. So there's a real mix of emotions out there, which I guess we all experience ourselves day to day or through family and friends, etc. But something really important to be considered as part of how we market and communicate ourselves and how we adapt our plans over the next six to 12 months as people come out of the pandemic. And when it comes to holidays, I think we all knew this anyway, but here it is reinforced in data. It looks very much set to be a UK summer, albeit, there may be some travel restrictions in place anyway. But most people have not planned anything yet. And for those that have, 58%, it may end up being more, expect it to be in the UK. But most interestingly, 31% don't anticipate they'll be having any holiday at all. I would hope that they would be taking time off, but in terms of it being a holiday of some sort, being quite limited. So to summarize, the key opportunities for brands to win using this data, or taking out the key elements of this data, are, one is to make sure that those brands create and publish inspiring trend-based content. So there's lots of trends in that data. There's many more trends that you guys are more familiar with, but certainly picnics, outdoor socializing, barbecues, etc., is a key trend. Easy and healthy meals at home is going to be a key trend. Lunchtime on-the-go solutions, summer in the UK. Those are all trends which stand out based on that data. And so you combine that with the fact that people are looking for inspiration, people are consuming large amounts of digital content. It's really important that as a brand, you find ways of either linking yourselves to this content, or B, even creating and pushing out this content. Two is a focus as a brand on how you can help in the preparation or be part of the preparation and the planning process. So that's about identifying media channels that help drive the list preparation, whether it be how you feature yourselves within a retailer.com element, whether that be how you feature yourselves as part of apps like Shopkin, or other features or functionality that enable you to add somebody to add themselves in some way to their planning stage. I've written down e-commerce sponsored search as an idea if it's something that you're not looking at with the retailers, but also how you can help support drive word of mouth amongst both your audience, but also your amongst your customers, but also your target audience. And then the third key takeout I see as being one where, as a brand, there needs to be a focus on removing the barriers. So again, if we look at a macro level across all that trend data, we've got levels of anxiety in society, we've got levels of apprehension, we've got people wanting to come out of what the situation that we're in at the moment. And so for a brand to continue to recruit new customers, to continue to drive that purchase, to continue to be relevant, it's important that you really remove the barriers and make life easy for those individuals. So for example, if you're trying to recruit new buyers, it's about, I don't know, using having a very compelling call to action for somebody to buy that product. If it's about driving repurchase, it's about how do you add value? It doesn't have to be monetary, but how do you add value that's relevant to the experience of that customer, or that subset. And then if you're from an advertising and a marketing perspective, how do you communicate very simply and clearly about what your product is, but most importantly, where can I buy it? Where can I pick it up? How do I buy it? What does it cost me? So if you're doing influencer activity or social activity, have that very simple call to action. This is what the product is, and this is where you can pick it up. Very important about removing those barriers. Just to tie up from a timing perspective, just want to summarize examples of how some brands have done that already. So here's an example of how Tilda earlier at the back end of last year used micro influencers to generate content, recipe content that fitted in with scratch cooking, for example. So a ready-made product which will be fitting into the convenience purchase, but how you can kind of fit it into your the current trends that we're seeing. So micro influencer generated content, and then very simple call to action. This is where you can buy it, and this is your introductory price to some extent, and driving people to store. Here's an example of how, again, so back to school was obviously huge last year because probably the biggest back to school occasion ever in September. And how a brand like, or a group like Nomad, under the Bird's Eye brand, but naturally have got Goodfellas within that as well, owned the occasion. And owning the occasion with a multi-product or a brand-themed campaign, which was about stocking up the freezer, making life a bit more simple for yourselves as a parent, so that you weren't working at home and then picking up your kids and having to prepare a meal for them at the same time. It was about making life easy. So another example. And then some examples of the way that Shopmin can help that pre-prep and planning stage. For those of you that use Shopmin, you may notice that we now have a My Selection functionality. So when somebody goes in store, they can see the products that they want to pick up in that particular store right at the top of their page that they've opted into. Two is that we are really using our data to deliver behaviorally targeted ads to people on the path to purchase. So an example here of a Cravendale campaign, which was served up in the proximity to an Asda store. So it was a brand-led campaign, but with a very simple drive to store, no offer in there at all. It was just about featuring the fact that this product was available. This is the brand message at this store. And then thirdly, something that we've released earlier this year is that we have the ability to do digital out of home campaigns, and we're looking for partners to partner on that. So that would be proximity to store served up with, this is where you can buy that particular product. It's 100 meters down on the right hand side. So that's an overview of some of the key results. We will, as I said at the start, for those of you that heard, we will be sharing a full copy of these results along with some of the key ideas. I thank you once again for joining the webinar. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A window. And we will hopefully speak to you all soon, and we'll share the details of the next set of results and how we plan on communicating that. Any questions? Okay, let's have a look. There's one question here about the previous results from the previous surveys. Are they available today? The answer is yes. We will, in the email that we send, we will share a link to where you can find the results from all the previous trend results from all the previous surveys. Okay. Brilliant. Well, I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and see you all soon.